Hey everyone, this is MusicTechHelpGuy. iZotope just released Ozone 9, and in this video I'll give you an overview of what's new in Ozone 9 and break down some of my workflow in Ozone as well. So if you follow this channel, you know that I love Ozone for mastering, and I use Neutron and Nectar quite a bit for mixing as well. So I'm a big fan of iZotope's plugins. So I'm really happy to check this out. For this video, I'm using Ozone 9 Advanced, although there is a standard version as well with less features and a cheaper price, but still less features. I'm still using the trial version for this review video, but I will eventually buy it. But if you don't want to spend $499 outright to get the advanced version, it's on sale right now for $399, but the regular price is $499. If you don't want to spend that much to get the advanced version, you can check out my affiliate link below, and you can buy it on the rent-to-own plan over at splice.com for 20 bucks a month. So that makes it a bit more affordable, and it helps support my channel as well. All right, so enough of that, let's get right into it. Overall, the look is pretty similar, but they did make some changes to the individual modules just for a better workflow. I'll get into that in just a bit, but first, let's talk about the Master Assistant. So Master Assistant isn't new. It's been around for a while. It was in Ozone 8 as well, but they've added the option for using vintage modules in addition to the modern modules. They've also made it easier to upload a reference track. This was in Ozone 8 as well, but you had to load the reference track in the reference panel here, and then you had to go over to Master Assistant and use the reference. Here you can just select the reference from your Finder window, select whatever WAV file you want as your reference, and you could use that as a mastering reference. So what this does is it'll apply an EQ curve and a loudness setting of the reference track. So it's right here, it's loaded up in my reference panel now. What this will do is it'll add an EQ curve and loudness setting based on the reference track. So this is great for mastering albums or EPs where you want the loudness or overall EQ curve of multiple songs to be somewhat similar. Not exactly similar, but somewhat similar. Now, although this is a nice touch, I find that if you want even more detail in your EQ curve, I find the match EQ a bit better for this, and we'll cover that in just a moment. So let's get back to the Master Assistant. I'm not going to use the reference for this demonstration. I'm going to use the vintage modules since that's new. I'll use a manual medium intensity loudness and EQ, and then I'll set my destination to streaming and then hit next. And so what this does is it asks me to play my audio, so I'll just play the track.
Don't tell me that you're faithless. Tell me that you're fearless. I told you that we're running out of time. Don't tell me I'm your burden. The last few years were worthless. Make it work forever right this time. Our last chance at redemption. Hell to pay deception.
So what this does is it analyzes the track, it applies EQ, multi-band dynamics, compression, and limiting to the track based on the analysis. Now, I'll just accept these changes. You can see it's added an EQ, the vintage EQ, the vintage compressor, the vintage limiter, and the maximizer for loudness. This is in no way an automatic way to master a track. Think of it as a good starting point. And another thing I'm really happy with Ozone 9 is that they fixed the maximizer when it's used with the Master Assistant. In Ozone 8, mine always seemed to overdo the loudness. The maximizer was just way too loud every time I used the Master Assistant, so I ended up just removing it completely and then re-adding a new one and adding my limiting there. So I'm happy. I'm really happy that they fixed that. So let's give this a listen. I'm going to bypass the whole plugin here, and I'm not going to bother gain or volume matching these, which you can do here, because when you're adding a maximizer and a limiter, the goal is to get more loudness. So I want you to hear the before and after with the volume shift, with the loudness change.
Don't tell me that you're faithless. Tell me that you're fearless. I told you that we're running out of time. Don't tell me I'm your burden.
And And it's very important that if you're going to be releasing your song for streaming, like on YouTube, Spotify, any streaming platform, that you set it to that streaming option. And the reason for that is in the maximizer, you'll see here it sets the maximum output ceiling at -1 dB. Now, this is something we would never do on CD masters. We'd set the ceiling to like -0.01 or -0.1 or -0.3, something along those lines, just to give it a little bit of space. But with streaming platforms, they're now asking for a maximum ceiling of -1 dB. And if you don't comply with that, your masters will actually be lowered. They'll actually be pushed down because your peak values are too high. So you kind of have to fit more loudness in a smaller space because your ceiling is -1 dB. It can't go any higher than that. So that's the Master Assistant. Next, let's go through some changes in individual modules and the new modules as well. So for each module, the options that used to be over here, so things like the different views, analog or digital mode, which are actually at the bottom for the EQs, and then also the stereo mid-side mode or left and right mode. All of these things used to be on the left side. Now they're up at the top. So this gives you a bit more viewing space for each of the modules. Another thing I love about Ozone is pretty much every module can be loaded in stereo or mid-side mode. So this is really super helpful for mastering because you can isolate the center and create a different EQ curve or a different compression setting for the mid channel versus the side channels. So it's like having two different EQs or two different processing modules, one for the center and then one for the sides. So this is really, really super useful. Another thing about the EQs is they've just renamed these Equalizer 1 and Equalizer 2. They used to be called Equalizer and then Post EQ. They're identical, so there's no reason to really name them any differently. So they've just named them EQ1 and EQ2. Another change they made to the EQs is that the details of each band show up in this floating window rather than being down at the bottom here. So I really like this. This is similar to how it's done in the newest version of Nectar 3. So here you can enable or disable each band. You can solo a band, and you can also get rid of a band. You can just click to add a new band in. And then here you can choose what type of band you want, several different bell curves, low shelf, high shelf, low pass, high pass. Let's add in a high pass here. And then you can adjust things like your slope, your frequency. If you're using bell curves, you can adjust things like your Q, your bandwidth, the center frequency or cutoff frequency, and the gain. And then if you're using the dynamic EQ, over here you can adjust the threshold for each band. And if you click on this arrow, you can adjust the auto scale of each band. So you can adjust the attack and release time and offset manually or automatically. Also note that in the EQs, there's no option for a matching EQ. And the reason for this is because they actually made the match EQ its own individual module. So I think the match EQ is absolute gold for mastering albums and EPs, where you want the overall tone of the album to be somewhat consistent. Obviously, you want each song to have its own character and feel and everything, but if there's a drastic tonal shift from song to song on the album, it can be kind of jarring sounding. So I like to take the best song on the album and use it as a gentle reference for the others, and I find that the match EQ is really cool for doing this. So in your reference panel over here, you can load up a song. I already loaded up a song from the Master Assistant where I loaded up that song, Losing Ground Final Mix here. So that's already there, but you can load it up from here as well. If you don't have one loaded up, there's just a plus button. You click on it, you load up the audio file. So what you can do is you can use this reference as a reference EQ curve and then apply that reference EQ curve to your current track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable my reference over here. And when I press play, it's just going to play whatever section I select over here. So I'm going to select the loudest section of the song.
Please tell me how, when all the
If I turn off the reference, if I disable it, it'll just play the song that's in my current Logic session.
Don't tell me that you're faithless. Tell me that you're fearless.
So let's say that I want to apply the references EQ curve to my current session. You can do that. So I'm just going to turn the reference on here, go back to the match EQ, click capture, and then hit play.
Please tell me how, when all the world is lost, we're losing ground.
And then after you've captured a good long section of it, then what you can do is turn off the reference and then hit capture again here for the apply to section, and then just play your current track.
Don't tell me that you're faithless. Tell me that you're fearless. I told you that we're running out of time. Don't tell me.
So then you see two different EQ curves here. You see the reference in orange, and you see the current in blue here. So what you can do is you can apply a certain amount of match EQ to this, and what this will do is match the current song to the reference as best as possible, and then you can also smooth out this curve. So if you want it to be more pointed and to have more peaks in it, you can pull down the smoothing, and if you want it to be more smooth, you can pull it up and round off those peaks, and then you can adjust the amount of matching here. So let me try this out, see how well I can match my current song to my reference.
Don't tell me that you're faithless. Tell me that you're fearless. I told you that we're running out of time. Don't tell me I'm your burden. The last few years were worthless. Make it work forever right this time.
Another new module that's really super helpful for mastering is the Master Rebalance module. This allows you to choose vocals, bass, or drums as a focus, and then you can add or reduce gain on that focus instrument or voice. So this is fantastic because in my experience, when I start adding bus compression on a track, sometimes the vocals can get lost or the transients and the drums can get lost. And this is really helpful to be able to pull out one of these instruments or vocals in a master track. It doesn't completely isolate the signal, but it helps to isolate some of the spectral elements of the voice, bass, or drums, and then you can boost those or cut them.
Don't tell me that you're faithless. Tell me that you're fearless. I told you that we're running out of time. Don't tell me I'm your burden. The last few years were worthless. Make it work forever right this time. Our last chance at redemption. Hell to pay deception. Girl, you've got a life.
Yeah, so that's really amazing that you can isolate these elements in a full mix without having access to the original mix and the original multi-track stems. So again, we can make some last-minute mix decisions while mastering, which is really crazy. Another thing that's even crazier is you can actually automate this parameter over time. So let's say that in the verses, the vocals were fine, but in the chorus, they were kind of buried. So you could actually automate this gain up in just the choruses of a song and then automate it back down for the verses. Another new module is the low end focus module. This is a bass shaping tool that helps with muddy low end in the mix. So bass management is such a difficult thing to get right in mastering, and this module makes it a lot easier to manage. So you can make your low end more punchy, or you can smooth it out. It's a very simple module, but very effective.
Don't tell me that you're faithless. Years were worthless. Make it work
Now you can select the range up here that you want this to be applied to, but it will not go above 300 hertz. So it's just applied to the bass. This is kind of similar to the spectral shaper, but specifically applied to the low end with less control. But one of the things this is really useful for is on live drum kit, like a full multi-track drum kit, where maybe the transient information is more in the highs and mid range. But sometimes when you add more punch and impact in the low end, this can help bring out the body of the drum overall. So I really find the punchy mode really useful for bringing out the low end impact. One of my favorite Ozone modules is the Ozone Imager. I love using this to spread the highs, spread out the mid lows, and then also take the bass range and narrow it and make the bass more mono.
Don't tell me that you're faithless. Tell me that you're fearless. I told you that we're running out of time. Don't tell me I'm your burden. The last few years were worthless.
So overall, the module hasn't changed too much, but what has changed is they've added two different modes to the imager. So mode 1 is a Haas effect decorrelation, and mode 2 is a velvet noise decorrelation. I'm not exactly sure what a velvet noise decorrelation is, but I have a feeling that it plays less with the timing of the signals than the first mode.
Don't tell me that you're faithless. Tell me that you're fearless. I told you that we're running out of time. Don't tell me I'm your burden. The last few years were worthless. Make it work forever right this time. Our last chance at redemption.
Mode 2 seems a bit more natural sounding, which is good with imaging. One of the problems with adding too much stereo imaging to a master is the correlation meter can start dropping below 0, which means you have out of phase stereo material. It seems like Mode 2 produces less of this, probably because there's less of a timing shift between the left and right channels on this mode. So that's pretty much everything that's new. There are some minor changes like in the multi-band modules like the imager, the exciter, the dynamics modules. There's this extra little lane up here where you can click to enter in the crossovers, and then you can adjust the range of the crossovers as well. So they don't assume that you just want 4 bands to work with. You can manually split them up yourself. And there's some other minor interface changes in the individual modules, but that pretty much wraps up what's new in Ozone 9. If you like this video, please leave it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this. You can also check out my Splice affiliate link below if you'd like to purchase Ozone on a rent-to-own plan and support the channel at the same time. You can also check me out on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and if you'd like to support the channel with a monthly donation, you can check me out at patreon.com/MusicTechHelpGuy. Thanks for the support, and thanks for watching.